We continue with the 25 basic principles of child rearing. This is based on the book, Our Family, Our Strength, that we've written. So we're now on principle number 15, building credit. Sometimes a person has a relationship with his bank manager. And it's always good to be on the good side of one's bank manager. Now, if this person is consistently making the efforts to make sure that his account is always in the positive, making an effort to make sure that none of his checks bounce, so he's built up for himself a good credit rating. And if this continues, he becomes a very well-liked customer, a favored customer. Now, if it should happen that he's going through a difficult patch, since he has a history of good, solid credit rating, if here and there he fails and he comes to the bank manager and says, look, things are going a bit tough, do you mind if I go into overdraft? I'm sorry, I need to issue a check that I know is not covered, but please help me out in this. Since he's got a history and a good track record of positive credit rating, the bank, if he's a reasonable fellow, if there's a decent relationship, because of the credit that's been built up in the past, he'll respect the momentary down periods. Now, every time a parent does something positive for the child, he's really, which involves parental sacrifice, self-sacrifice, like the child forgets his sandwiches at home, and he goes off to school for a long day, and he forgot to take his lunch with him. So some will say, well, it jolly well serves him right, and let him sit and be hungry, and he'll come home, he won't do it again. That's one approach. I'm not sure if it's the right approach. Another approach will be to say, okay, well, my sweet little child, forgetful, probably was focused on something else, was dreaming, was thinking of something else, left his lunch, I'll go and take him the lunch. And he goes and he brings the child the lunch, and of course explains to the child not to let this become habitual. He explains to the child that this shouldn't happen again, but the parent has put himself out for the child. And the child knows this, and the child recognizes this. And this is, in a certain sense, building up credit rating with the child. The child sees that constantly, over and over, parents are putting themselves out for him. Parents will go and they'll pitch for him with his teacher, even if he necessarily doesn't deserve it, but they'll go and be his advocate, and they'll go and they'll intervene where necessary, and they'll help him out with social issues. They'll sit through the night, if necessary, when the child has some test or some project to finish. So every time the parent does an act of self-sacrifice, he, in a subtle way, it may not be always obvious, but he's building up credit rating. And it doesn't need to always be mentioned or articulated. We don't need to constantly be harping to our children, you see what I do for you, you see what I do for you. Just keep plying our children with chesed, with loving kindness. The child notes it subconsciously. And this credit stands the parent in good stead when he's got to mete out a punishment. Sometimes a child needs a punishment. Sometimes a child needs to be sanctioned. He needs to be reprimanded. Or sometimes we need to demand of the child something which to him constitutes a great challenge. So if the child really feels the parent love him, and really feels that they've been putting themselves out for him, and they've been sacrificing for him, he'll much more readily accept the discipline. He'll accept the discipline because he knows they've got a good credit rating. So right now, he's down, there's some down, but he'll accept it. And the parent, because sometimes there is a need. There's a need for reprimand, there's a need for modifying a child's behavior. Sometimes it's a painful experience to do it, but the child will understand in his deep subconscious that I know they're there for me. I know they are constantly so good and so much at my side that in a healthy relationship, the child is less likely to build up resentment towards his parents if the parents have a good credit rating. If the credit rating is good, then the child will understand and will respect the fact that sometimes he needs to be sanctioned. He'll respect that because in general, overall, the credit rating of the parents are good.